Morning, Malcolm Nance.
Good morning, Steffi.
How are you, sir?
I'm fine. Glad to see you're home.
I am home. And listen, you have always said March is the really like tipping point for Trump Russia. This is the last week in March. This is the last Wednesday in March. I will talk to you. And I got to say, wow. You appear to be right because there's just I know we use the word bombshell every week, and so it's overused. But so the Mueller team today, this is the latest, reveals Manafort business associate Rick Gates he knew that he was basically talking to a Russian operative. Um,
Right. Yeah.
when will this be done, Daddy?
No. I've been discussing this. This rabbit hole is like it's not even a rabbit hole. Okay, it's like a maze of rabbit holes that you can go down and you can never come back up from. Never Land or wherever that Wonderland or wherever this thing is leading.
Right.
I mean, there are just so many avenues of inquiry now. You could just never stop. I mean, Rick Gates alone, this one little tidbit where they were talking about person of interest A between Gates and this guy Vander Swan, both of whom have been indicted and pled guilty, to lying to FBI officers, spoke about person A, who it is generally believed is the lawyer that was in lobbyist that was at the meeting with Natalia Veselnitskaya and Donald Trump Jr., named Konstantin Klimnik. And he was a former GRU officer, Russian military intelligence officer. He made no bones about it. He told people about that. But now that indictment, the modification to the filing that was done, pretty much makes it clear that he wasn't out of the business. So
Right.
Gates and Vander Swan knew, and we're discussing it.
And Gates is now cooperating, with Mueller.
Geez, we're going to go so deep down this thing.
I know. It's like every single report. The other one, obviously, we talked about that broke yesterday. So the Christopher Steele, in this dossier, the special report authored also by him, alleges former aide to Vladimir Putin was assassinated in D.C., did not die by accident, as the Department of Justice ruled. Like, this is all coming together. I remember at the time, I was like, really? The founder of RT, got drunk and fell and died? Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
they quote an FBI...
Slipped.
They quote an FBI guy saying, what I can tell you is there isn't a single person inside the Bureau who believes this guy got drunk, fell down, and died. Everyone thinks he was whacked and that Putin and the Kremlin were behind it, period.
Absolutely. And, we talked about this when we had the Skripal assassination, is that now all of these deaths have to be rescrubbed. And, I'm sorry, the Steele dossier, right now it's running at 90% confidence. I mean, these things are all being validated. I think we said this over a year ago.
Yeah.
The Kremlin themselves are validating it by killing off the people who may have been the confidential sources.
Well, thank you. Like, how do you say there's no there with Trump Russia? This many people don't get dead if there's not some giant, a huge story that's being covered up here. So this is a guy that founded RT,
Right.
and again was beaten to death. I mean, that's like. Yeah, go ahead.
Funny how that's like, look at just what happened in London 2 weeks ago after the Skripal attempted assassination.
Yes.
They had another guy, Golovkin, I think his name who was strangled to death just before he was supposed to speak, and testify about Russian operations in the UK. This is just weeks ago. The Russians have a death to spies campaign going on right now. It's probably being done at the hands of the oligarchs or a combination of, subcontractor and, hitmen. But it is happening, right? You can't deny it anymore. And that that the United States is now involved in that makes you wonder just whether they have people in this country who aren't Russian spies, who aren't under the control of the Kremlin diplomatic facility.
Yeah.
Who may be living in South Florida in Little Moscow,
yes,
who are out there intending to whack ex-Russian KGB and FSB officers.
Yeah. Well, and someone in our studio yesterday speculated that they hope Ed Schultz gets out of RT before there's a mysterious fly fishing accident, which is hugely inappropriate. It's not funny anymore. It's like, that's the thing is these people, I mean, there's people anywhere around this whole investigation that you fear for, right?
Well, useful idiots are never going to have to fear for their lives. Stalin had made that pretty clear. So long as they keep talking and opening their mouth, guys like Edward Snowden and, others who are on the extreme libertarian anti-democratic party left, they don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah.
It's the people who have crossed, people who have, if I were Rick Gates, I'd make sure there's a little extra security at the house, and I wouldn't be drinking glasses of tea.
People are starting to get hip, Malcolm. A lot of my listeners have written in about how you notice the troll infestations, them trying to, whip up the Bernie Hillary stuff again, all that kind of, all the kind of stuff that I think, all of these issues end up getting connected right now, right? These are just the headlines this morning. NRA admits moving money from accounts with foreign donations to U.S. campaign accounts. Whistleblower says Robert Mercer should be investigated for using Trump digital ops to illegally funnel money. This broke while I was gone, Malcolm, but it's hard to underestimate this whole Cambridge Analytica thing, Facebook. So obviously Mark Zuckerberg is going to testify now.
Right.
But talk to us about this. Facebook has been enduring a crisis of trust, as I'm reading, since it was revealed Cambridge Analytica, data firm with ties to Trump's campaign, reportedly accessed information from 50 million Facebook users without their knowledge. This is a huge part of this, isn't it?
It's a gigantic part of it. And for those of you who didn't know, I was in, while you were in D.C., I was in L.A. last week, and I was on Bill Maher, and I said this very thing. I said, Cambridge Analytica is a James Bond villain, evil organization. Their sole function, this is the weaponization. I've never seen political and propaganda warfare, even in the United States government, where we have organizations that do this. I was just sort of mild and like an NGO. The Russians look for every seam, every crack between our, in society. Like you said, the Bernie Sanders, Jill Stein, Hillary voters, and they freaking create product, and they put a wedge in there, and they strike it with an electronic sledgehammer. They weaponize Facebook. Granted, Facebook was designed to allow you to put all your own private information out there, but it takes an evil genius to grab that information, break it down so that they know down to the individual Facebook user what his or her likes, dislikes, emotional triggers are, what videos they like, and then to use a foreign intelligence agency and private contractors to create information for you specifically, so that they can jury rig your belief system and change your mind and control the way you think. Look, go back to all the Bond films. You won't find this one.
Yeah. Well, and you also
this is trouble.
Yeah, and you tweeted about, you said this expulsion slowly follows Russia expelling over 400 U.S. employees from Russia last year. Trump praised Putin for doing that, right? Said he's saving us money. This was done for Theresa May. But it is so interesting, Malcolm. First of all, the first sanctions were just complete BS, right? They sanctioned 13 individuals that are never going to come here. This doesn't hurt Putin or the Kremlin at all, right?
You have to actually argue that. By the way, that number was wrong. It was firing 766 U.S. embassy employees all across Russia last year in response to the Obama administration sanctions, which were targeted, right? But, you have to understand something. Russian intelligence, what do they need that stuff for when you literally have someone who is stepping up to the plate for you every day in the White House? Mm-hmm. Okay, and I don't say that lightly.
Yeah.
Donald Trump does the bidding of the Kremlin.
Well, just him congratulating Putin when he was told not to. I thought, is he like daring us to arrest him for treason? It's
not treason, but yet. But I'm just saying, rhetorically, right? Rhetorically, you can use any word you want, but legally, you have to wonder, what is it? John Brennan and Mike Hayden, the two directors of the CIA, have both said that there is clearly some financial stake that's happening here, which is empire-shattering for Donald Trump. That is the depth has to be at that level for this behavior to happen. I literally wrote a chapter on this in my new forthcoming book, where I spell out pretty much an indictment of where it's pretty clear Donald Trump is an agent of Russia. Yeah. And I use that term agent carefully also. it means that he is wittingly working with them for an unknown result. And that result has to be that he owes something to Vladimir Putin. I don't even think it's coercion. I think the only thing that would really influence Trump is if the Trump organization could be collapsed in 5 minutes by the lifting of a finger from the Kremlin. And that means money.
Yeah. So Russia vowed yesterday to respond to the expulsion of its diplomats and I thought this was interesting, their statement. They said, when one or two diplomats are asked to leave this or that country with apologies being whispered into our ears. Doesn't that sound like from Trump? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, we know for certain this is a result of colossal pressure. What do you make of that whole thing?
Well, what happened is I think the policy was developed completely without him. I think it was done at the National Security Council level and the General Kelly level and the General Mattis level because every one of our allies came together with this unified plan to get rid of a percentage of known intelligence operatives inside each of their countries. Britain expelled, I believe, 21, which is pretty large for England. And these are the known people who are signals intelligence collectors and human intelligence officers working as residents in these countries. But that happened despite Donald Trump. He did not mention one word about this. He did not engage on this, not once. The White House didn't mention it other than the fact once it happened. Theresa May called him and said, this is what's happening. You need to step up to the plate, or you're not an ally of England. So he did it, as I said, because of Churchill's bust, right?
Yeah.
But he would not have done this had it not been an alliance-wide thing. But what does the Kremlin care?
Right, and so
what does the Kremlin care? You've got a guy literally carrying their water, right, in both hands and in his teeth.
Right. Yeah, and by the way, the fact that they sanctioned the 13 Russians, I guess, proves that Mueller's doing a good job because that was obviously Mueller's result. And then, obviously Kellyanne Conway can now go out and go, oh, see, well, this just explodes the whole myth that Trump is not tough on Russia. I'm like, no.
Trump personally hasn't said a word about this.
Yeah.
Okay. And he won't. He will not. He cannot. I would love to see the NDA that he has with Putin. I mean, it must be. That must just blow Stormy Daniels out of the water.
You said blow and Stormy Daniels. But also, you have mentioned, like other people have, only two people he's never attacked: Vladimir Putin, Stormy Daniels, right?
And Rachel Maddow. So.
Oh, yes, that's right.
How's that not happen?
Yeah.
But, he won't. He understands threat. He understands what an existential threat to his empire. I've heard from people that know him personally, people who've written about him extensively, have interviewed him, hung out with him, and they say he fears nothing except personal humiliation on his name in the Trump organization. And clearly, whatever Moscow may have loaned him large quantities of money, we may find out that Deutsche Bank facilitation was just enough that's the one thing that he fears exposure from, that he is worth nothing and that he is owned by someone else.
Malcolm, I've said this consistently, that I'm afraid he's going to start a war when, Mueller gets close. And here comes John Bolton, right, who advocates a first strike on Iran and North Korea. I mean, what do you think the end game is here and when? I mean, obviously, this is the last week in March. When you've predicted March, what in your mind? First of all, do you think there's going to be more indictments this week?
Well, I don't know if there will be more indictments this week. March was a good guess. Was an informed guess on the basis of how the government runs. And last year we only had so many working days in the year. When I made that prediction in June. But the one I'm waiting for is Jared Kushner.
Yeah.
You cannot tell me I'm going to stake my entire ability to do predictive analysis here. Jared Kushner, the circumstantial evidence would have had anyone arrested a long time ago.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, unknown knowns out there. I mean, there's, how did he get his money? Did he engineer that operation to sideline Qatar because he was turned down for a loan against by his father, by the Al Thani sheikhdom in Qatar. Did he work with the Saudis to isolate them?
Yeah.
Did he get all of his money from the Russian Bank of Spies, where he went? And you know what? My big one, that secret backdoor communications channel at the Russian embassy.
Yeah.
That should have resulted in an arrest.
Yeah.
That shouldn't have resulted in a clearance pulling.
Yeah.
And all of his staff losing their clearance.
Yeah.
These are things that, I'm sorry, if they're fractionally true, we'll end up with an indictment.
Yep. Listen, as Nanstradamus, who has predicted so many things correctly, thank you for the barf bag alert on the spanking scene that Stormy Daniels described, because you're right. None of us will ever get that out of our heads. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Oh.
I mean, that is, but conservatives, evangelicals, they do not care a whit about any of this.
Yeah.
And they would rather compromise, and they don't care a whit about conspiracy with Russia. They don't care about anything other than their tax breaks and, humiliating, everyone who is not a Trump supporter.
Yeah.
We're in a very, very dangerous place in American history with this. And, bringing Yosemite Sam on, Bolton, who had to be appointed in his positions, was a toxic leader and a man who loves. He was an Army reservist who refused to go to Vietnam. Okay, that's all you need to know. Mm-hmm. Whereas real war fighters who've been out there their entire lives are saying this man cannot be allowed to come into government. Now he's in charge of national security policy, and it won't be war with North Korea; it'll be war with Iran. That's what he's going for. Regime change in Iran, and we're going to fight 80 million people who are very intelligent, well armed, and who own a good piece of Central Asia.
All right.
Other than that, things are awesome.
Good night, kids. Everything's awesome. You were fantastic on Bill Maher. Handsome, romantic, dead on the money as usual,
and polite.
And polite. All right, honey. See you next week.
All right. Take care.
All right. There he goes. Malcolm Nance.